of Sri Aurobindo from the book Letters on Yoga Part 1 from the collective works of Sri Aurobindo, Volume 28, page 129, topic Planes or Worlds of Consciousness, continuation from yesterday's discussion about the planes or the worlds of consciousness by our Lord Sri Aurobindo. Our Lord says, if we regard the gradation of worlds or planes as a whole, we see them as a great connected complex moment. The higher precipitate their influences on the lower react to the higher and develop or manifest in themselves within their own formula something that corresponds to the superior power and its action. The material world has evolved life in obedience to a pressure from the vital plane, mind in obedience to a pressure from the mental plane. It is now trying to evolve supermind in obedience to a pressure from the supramental plane. In more detail, particular forces, movements, powers, beings of a higher world can throw themselves on the lower to establish appropriate and corresponding forms which will connect them with the material domain and, as it were, reproduce or project their action here. Sri Aurobindo says, and each thing created here has supporting it subtler envelopes or forms of itself which make it subsist and connect it with forces acting from above. Man, for instance, has besides his gross physical body, subtler sheets or bodies by which he lives behind the wheel in direct connection with supraphysical planes of consciousness and can be influenced by their powers, moments and beings. What takes place in life has always behind it pre-existent moments and forms in the occult vital planes. What takes place in the mind presupposes pre-existent moments and forms in the occult mental planes. That is an aspect of things which becomes more and more evident, insistent and important the more we progress in a dynamic yoga. But all this must not be taken in too rigid and mechanical a sense. It is an immense plastic moment full of the play of possibilities and must be seized by a flexible and subtle tact or sense in seeing consciousness. It cannot be reduced to a too rigorous logical or mathematical formula. 2 or 3 points must be pressed in order that this plasticity may not be lost to our view. First, each plane, in spite of its connection with others above and below it, is yet a world in itself, with its own moments, forces, beings, types, forms, existing as if for its and their own sake, under its own laws, for its own manifestation, without apparent regard for other members of the great series. Thus, if we regard the vital or the subtle physical plane, we see great ranges of it, most of it, existing in themselves without any relation with the material world and with no moment to affect or influence it, still less to precipitate a corresponding manifestation in the physical form. Sri Aurobindo says, at most we can say that the existence of anything in the vital, subtle physical or any other plane creates a possibility for a corresponding moment of manifestation in the physical world. But something more is needed to turn that static or latent possibility into a dynamic potentiality or an actual urge towards a material creation. That something may be a call from the material plane, that is, some force or someone in the physical existence entering into touch with a supraphysical power or world or part of it and moved to bring it down into the earth life. Or it may be an impulse in the vital or other plane itself, that is, vital being moved to extend his action towards the earth and establish there a kingdom for himself for the play of force, for which he stands in his domain. Or it may be a pressure from above, let us say some supramental or mental power, precipitating its formation from above and developing forms and movements on the vital level as a means of transit towards self-creation in the material world. Or it may be all these things acting together, in which case there is the greatest possibility of an effective creation. Sri Aurobindo says, next, as a consequence, it follows that only a limited part of the action of the vital or the higher planes is concerned with the earth existence. Even this creates a mass of possibilities which is far greater than the earth can at one time manifest or contain in its own less plastic formulas. All these possibilities do not realize themselves. Some fail altogether and leave at the most an idea that comes to nothing. Some try seriously and are repelled and defeated, and even if in action for a time come to nothing, others effectuate a half manifestation, and this is most usual result. The more so as these vital or other supraphysical forces come into conflict and have not only to overcome the resistance of the physical consciousness and of matter, but their own internecine resistance to each other. A certain number succeeded in precipitating their results in a more complete and successful creation, so that if you compare that creation with its own original in the higher planes, there is something like a close resemblance or even an apparently exact reproduction or translation from the supraphysical to the physical formula. And yet, even there, the exactness is only apparent. The very fact of translation into another substance and another rhythm of manifestation makes a difference. It is something new that has manifested. It is that makes the creation worthwhile. What, for instance, would be the utility of a supramental creation on earth if it were just the same thing as a supramental creation on the supramental plane? It is that in principle. But yet something else, a triumphant new self-discovery of the divine in conditions that are not elsewhere. No doubt, the subtle physical is closest to the physical and most like it. But yet the conditions are different and the things too different. For instance, the subtle physical has a freedom, plasticity, intensity, power, color, wide and manifold play. There are thousands of things that there are not here, of which as yet we have no possibility on earth. And yet there is something here, a potentiality of the divine, which the other, in spite of its greater liberties, has not, something which makes creation more difficult, but in the last result justifies the labor. Sri Aurobindo says each plane of consciousness contains the others in itself, in principle. In the physical consciousness, there is a physical mind, a vital force and action, which we call the vital physical and the physical proper or material. Mind has its own realms and life has its own realms, just as matter has. In the mental realms, life and substance are entirely sub-oriented to mind and obey its dictates. Here on earth, there is the evolution with matter as the starting point, life as the mind emerging from it. There are many grades, realms, combinations in the cosmos. There are even many universes. Ours is only one of the many. Next subtopic, the planes and the body. Sri Aurobindo says the heavenly worlds are above the body. What the parts of the body corresponds to are planes, subtle, physical, higher, middle, and lower vital, mental. Each plane is in communication with various worlds that belongs to it. The appearance of the being in other plane is not the same necessarily as that of the physical body. Very often, the form taken by the vital or psychic or mental is very different from the physical form. Even when they resemble on the whole, there is always some difference. These are the words of our Lord Sri Aurobindo.